Welcome to Mystical Messages. I am Hilary Harley, your podcast host. I am a soul guide and astrologer. Mystical Messages is your podcast gateway to discover and learn about the realm beyond the veil, including all things intuitive, metaphysical, and the healing arts. To learn more about my work or to book a session with me, please visit hilaryharley.com. If you would like to read my monthly forecast, you may find the full written transcript for all astrology episodes on my website. That way, if you hear something and want to re-listen to a forecast or to check a date of a cosmic event, you may find it on the written monthly forecast on hilaryharley.com. Today, we are discussing bird vibes, meditation cards. They are the creation of Catherine Bastedo. And I am so delighted to have Catherine here today to join me to understand more about her creation, Bird Vibes, the meditation card deck. And before we get too far into the discussion, I just want to let everybody know they may find Catherine at Catherine with a C, Catherine C. Bastedo, Bastedo.com. And her company is Vision Reiki. You may find her on Facebook under Vision Reiki, but on Instagram and her LinkedIn, it's all catherinecbastedo.com. So welcome, Catherine. Thank you so much for joining me today.
Thank you very much, Hilary. I'm very excited to be here, and I'm feeling really good right now, and I'm looking forward to talking to everyone.
So tell us how you came to create this amazing deck. I have the deck myself, Bird Vibes, and they are exceptionally beautiful and extremely thoughtful and well organized and beautiful to look at and to work with. How did you come to create these?
It's a bit of a story, Hilary. I think I've always been connected to nature and probably to spirit, although I may not have realized it early on. But my childhood was spent north of Lake Superior in Ontario, in quite a remote area, actually, and the little pulp and paper town was only accessible by rail at the beginning. So you can imagine it was fairly remote at the time, and right near the bush, and the nature surrounded us constantly. My mother was an amateur naturalist and very intuitive as well. And she introduced me to birds particularly. Summer times we spent in nature as well. So I've always been connected with birds. That was part of it. I had a traditional career for a long time with the Canadian government, the Canadian federal government. And after a certain point, I thought maybe there were other things that I could do. And I'd been taking Reiki classes for one thing. I'd actually been exploring many things, tarot, parapsychology, you name it. I knew there was something out there, and I found Reiki.
Mm-hmm.
And Reiki led me to understanding that nature could be used as a way of reaching our inner self and connecting with spirit.
Yes.
That's the beginning of the story.
Yes, Reiki is a gateway for sure. It's so connected to the heart. So how long were you practicing? Were you practicing Reiki?
I started, like I said, I did the higher levels of Reiki in about 2007, I believe it was. That was holographic Reiki, which is Reiki of a type started here in Ottawa, Canada. And it was a Reiki that was very much connected to nature, which is what drew me to it, and understanding the symbolism of birds, animals, trees. You may know of Ted Andrews' work
Yes.
of symbolism. Well, we were very much focused on that type of thing, the symbolism of of nature. And I have a background in literature. My master's was in literature. So I love
Uh,
archetypes and symbolism and metaphors. And I really connected with holographic Reiki. And I went in to meet this teacher. I had decided I needed a new teacher, and she was teaching this holographic Reiki. And when I walked into her office, and at the time I was working for our federal government, I had my business suit on. I was coming from our Treasury Board. I was looking very business-like, right? Dark blue navy suit, the heels, the whole bit. And I walked into her office, and we looked at each other. There were angels all over the walls, and I thought, what am I doing? And she
wow.
said, do you know there's a hawk sitting on your shoulder and it has a broken wing? And I looked at her like, what am I doing here? But
Wow.
she has become a very close friend and what my teacher for my Reiki Master program. And she said, hawks are messengers in terms of symbolism. And she said, you have messages to deliver. And that was really the beginning of bird vibes, that I knew there was something that I was meant to write about, talk about, and a way that I needed to connect with spirit through nature and help people, other people do that.
That is fascinating. I have to say, I have your deck and I have been working with it. And what I learned from you today, and I want to talk a little bit about, is that it is not an oracle deck. These are meditation cards. And if you could, please elaborate on that and the difference and what you're hoping people will use them for.
Well, I've always felt that I was a channel, not just for Reiki, but for helping people understand themselves better and reach their authentic self. And I believe that when one picks up a card like this, like in my Bird Vibes deck, and reads it and really reflects on it a little bit, what does this mean for me? How do I apply it to myself? Then we are the ones who can come to the understanding. So I think the difference for me is this: my cards aren't telling people, they're asking people, here are some words. Now you take these words and reflect upon it yourself. And
Okay.
maybe I could give you an example that would help, perhaps.
Yes, for sure.
So, so I went outside today. It's cold here. It's turned crisp. Anyway, it's cold. And I went outside, and there are not many birds around. They were around yesterday, and I said to my partner, I think the birds knew something because they were all around the feeders yesterday, and today they're all staying home. But there was a
Ah,
raven out there that was croaking, and ravens are a symbol of magic in many cultures,
mhm.
magic and intelligence. And there's a raven in my card. So I thought, hello, Raven. And Raven always shows up for me when often when I would be going to a Reiki class, Raven would show up and I would hear its low croak. So the card of Raven, which I can show to you, and it has a deep purple background, and it's
It's
quite
beautiful.
an intelligent looking raven. If you could, I'm anthropomorphizing the bird a bit, but it says, use your tools. The common raven has remarkable problem solving intelligence. The low croak reminds us that magic is in the air. The raven insists that you do have the power, the resources, and the understanding. Think about how to use these. So if you take this as a meditation card, then you would read these lines and say, oh, well, this card, first of all, it's in the sixth chakra. So that's my intuition, my
Mm-hmm.
intellect. It's perhaps a way of connecting with spirit, with my higher self. The raven's telling me that I have the power and the resources. What is it that I need to do right now? How am I going to use these powers? And what do I need to do with them?
Mm-hmm.
So sometimes people may want to do a little meditation, or it may be in a group class, and others will reflect on these words for the person, say, well, but you could be doing this or that. So that's perhaps a bit of an example of how to use it as a meditation card. But the guidebook gives a number of examples.
Yes, the guidebook is very thoughtfully written, and you can tell you have a literature and writing background because it is. I was a journalism major, and so I
Ah,
appreciate beautiful language, and so it's constructed in a way that is very thoughtful. Um, and so, could you tell me how you came to decide which. So just for the audience, so you know, on one side of the card, there is a picture of a bird, beautiful illustration of a bird. And on the reverse side, there is a color at the top with a number and then a description of the bird. And so, for example, the one I'm looking at right now is the northern flicker. And there's a beautiful illustration of the flicker on one card, on one side of the card. On the reverse side, there's a color of green and the number 23. And then the card description describes northern flicker and live in the moment, and description of what the northern flicker is about and how it relates to living in the moment. So, how did you come to assign the color of the chakra?
I had been working with chakras for a while through my Reiki and also through yoga. So I was familiar with chakras, and I thought I was aware that the chakras have different attributes, so that we know that the crown chakra is connection with spirit and so on, and the root chakra is connection with the ground, and all the chakras have various attributes. And I thought I could combine the birds with the attributes of the chakras and connect the attributes of the birds to the chakras. So I used an 8 chakra system. I know a 7 chakra is more common, but I felt 8 chakras were meant to be in this deck. And so I put the snowy owl in the 8th chakra, and the one bird in the 8th chakra. And the other 7 chakras have 7 birds each. Seven seemed to be the appropriate number. Some
Mhm.
of this was intuitive, of course, and some of it was logical. So there was a combination in this. So when I look at the crown chakra, for example, some of the birds seemed very obvious, and this goes back to many cultures too, eagles and hawks and so on. I've always been seen from time going back thousands of years as being in the higher chakras, although they may not have called them chakras then.
Right.
Uh, but some of the chakras were less obvious. For the example, the solar plexus. And sometimes I went with the color of the bird. So, for example, the goldfinch,
Hmm.
beautiful yellow bird, and I'm looking at it right now. It's one of the cards I picked before the interview, and the goldfinch seemed to want to come out this beautiful sunny yellow color,
It's
and
gorgeous.
it says think positively. And so the goldfinch seemed to me to be important to put in the solar plexus, where we we find a lot of feelings are stuck, and a lot of problems and issues get buried in the solar plexus. And when we bring that beautiful sunny color and positive thoughts, it helps clear that chakra. So that was part of it. And the songbirds went into the throat chakras, but people
Ah,
said, well,
right.
which birds? How did, I mean, there are many songbirds. That was a
Right.
bit of a harder one. And I
Right.
had to decide which birds. So I made a criterion for myself, which was that I needed to have not only seen all of the birds in my deck, but to have had some kind of an experience with them. So if there is a robin in the deck, but it wasn't just a robin on the front lawn in the springtime. It had to have been a bit more than that. So I have seen all of the birds in my deck. Some of them are not so common, like the snowy owl, but I've seen them at least once. And when I saw them, it was a memorable experience.
In person, you've
Yes,
seen,
yes, in person.
wow.
Yes, yes.
Wow.
No, I'm not an ornithologist, but I do love watching birds. And wherever I go, I will look for the birds and buy myself a bird book, whether I'm in Europe or Florida or Canada. I just love watching birds. So
So that is one of my questions. Did you choose birds because they are so immediate to our environment and around us? They're messengers. I know many people, for instance, view the cardinal as a relative who's passed that has come to visit, or mourning doves. I've had a lot of mourning doves in my own life appear. And so, as opposed to choosing a different kind of animal, um,
I think it was because I'm particularly drawn to birds. And the birds fit with other animals as well. If you're familiar with Ted Andrews, and he talks about the food chain. Excuse me. So if we look at um, some birds, they might be preying on others or on other animals, or animals might be preying on those birds, and all of nature. And then we relate to the plant world. All of nature is connected. But if I had to choose one part of it, then it was the birds. They're just, I find, very uplifting,
Hmm.
and I try to be positive in my life. And I like that birds do that for me, and I think they do it for other people. And sometimes they just fit with our mood. Your example of the cardinals is a really good one, because a number of people have talked to me about cardinals showing up when a loved one has passed away.
Right. I had never heard of that until I was working with a hospice Reiki client, and her mother passed. And just after her mother passed, all these cardinals came to visit her, and I was catching up after her mom had passed, and she said, "Oh, these cardinals, they're right by my window and they've created a nest." And she took photos of them and she had them mounted and framed, and they're really stunning photographs. So do you know how the cardinal came to be such a totem or representative of ancestors that have passed?
Well, one thing I've heard is that birds with a crest are seen to be connected to spirit. It's a
Okay.
little bit like the idea of a hat as a religious symbol.
Hmm.
In many religions, the hat is part of the symbolism. And a bird with a crest, like a blue jay or a cardinal, it has that, perhaps more, that connection. Other than that, I'm not sure. Perhaps that they flock together, or that here we see them um, mostly single, so it's unusual to see a flock. And
Hmm.
then, oh, isn't that beautiful? A flock of, particularly when it's snowing and the cardinals come in against the white snow, it's very beautiful.
Right, right. No, that's true. And I also think in her case, her mother was Italian and had come over from Italy. So I thought perhaps it was a bit of Italian folklore, or, somehow tied culturally to her background. Um, so these cards are exquisitely illustrated. How did you come to find your illustrator?
Well, it was a beautiful synchronicity. I had written the cards. I had been hunting. I like to take pictures, but I knew my photographs weren't the quality that I needed for a deck. And I had been looking at photographs. I thought they were, whenever I found one that was way too expensive to do a whole deck and give somebody copyright for pictures, and they weren't illustrating the cards necessarily. And then one day, by a beautiful happenstance, someone said, "Well, have you seen Heather Bale's pictures?" And she's an Ottawa artist. So just across the river from me, I live in Gatineau, Quebec, and across the river is Ottawa, Ontario. And someone said, "Have you seen her pictures? They were being exhibited at a little gift shop not too far." And I went in. I thought, "Oh my goodness, they were the exact size that I wanted my cards to be." So
Ah,
I thought, that's something. I was able to reach her, and I went over to see her. She specializes in birds, miniature paintings of birds. And I said, "Would you paint cards for my deck?" So these cards were painted specially for the words that I wrote. And I gave her
oh,
a complete free hand. She was not a Reiki person, but she was very spiritual because she's a bird lover, and
right.
she does wonderful paintings. And she said yes, and she did all the paintings. They were, I think there was only one change I made, and I said the bluebird is a bluebird of happiness. It needs to look a little bit happier in the picture, and she added some pink into the clouds so that there was that just added happiness in the picture.
Right.
And apart from that, her paintings just intuitively fit the words.
So they are exquisite to look at, just to meditate upon the images that she has crafted and illustrated. So from how I'm understanding, you created the words and assigned the chakras to the cards and the birds, and then the illustrations came later.
That's right. And the illustrations were made to fit the words so that if you look at the whippoorwill, for example, it says simplify your life. And it talks about the whippoorwill, and it's one of the birds that is not so common now, unfortunately. But it says the whippoorwill builds no nest, but incubates the eggs in a small depression on well-drained ground. Maintain simplicity, and consider carefully your material needs. So when I gave her this text, she painted a whippoorwill that is nesting on the ground. You can see two eggs. You can see it on the leaves.
Right.
And so
Yes.
she painted what I wrote,
Wow.
and
Wow.
it went into the first chakra because it nests on the ground. It is so connected to the ground. It has no nest. It's directly on the ground. So
Right.
what better root connector is there than that? And it's a
Exactly.
very simple bird. It has a beautiful song. I used to hear it as a child, but I haven't heard one for many years.
Yes, it
And
comes to mind. I used to hear them. I grew up in Pennsylvania, southwestern Pennsylvania, and I used to hear them all the time. And I haven't thought about not hearing one.
No.
Uh,
Well, it's one of the things that I'm hoping with this deck is that people will start remembering these things. People will go out and look at the birds around them. People will be more concerned about the loss of some numbers of the birds, and we'll just perhaps bring a little bit more awareness. And each card has a fact about the bird. It starts with a fact and then goes into the spiritual message. And I asked an ornithologist to verify the facts on all the birds. So this Chris Early at the University of Guelph went through all the cards for me and made a few
um,
suggestions.
mhm.
So where I hadn't considered that the male was quite not the same as the female,
Right.
and or that maybe a swan didn't fly as high as I thought it did. He
Right.
was right there with the accuracy. So someone can learn about a little bit about birds as well as
Yes. I mean,
appreciating them.
yes, that's what really caught my attention too, was that I didn't know if you had a background in ornithology because these cards are so carefully researched. And it seemed to me that they were very carefully researched, and you must have known a great deal. But so, how did you, what process of selection, as you know, because there are millions of kinds of birds and species? I mean, were the ones that spoke to you much more clearly that you wanted to include? Did you have to exclude some that
I would
you,
think about half of them at least came to me right away, which because of experiences that I'd had with them, and um, some of them came to me intuitively when I was stuck, and I'd say, "Please help, spirit! I need to
Mhm.
know. I need another bird in the fifth chakra. Which one will it be? Because there's so many songbirds, I don't know which one to put in there."
Right,
And
right.
so some of it came to me intuitively. Yes, I had to exclude. I didn't want two eagles in there, for example, and I chose to have a golden eagle, which and then a bald eagle. Uh, uh, I chose a veery because I associate that beautiful thrush with my mother,
Mm.
and that the words of the veery come from an old poem that she used to like by an American poet from many years back, Van Dyke. So there were
Uh,
Henry Van Dyke wrote a poem called The Veery, which was one of my mother's favorite poems. So I had to put the Veery in there.
right.
So there were a few birds like that, but I have seen them all, and I've traveled a fair bit. But these are birds mostly from the eastern side of North America, some more northerly, like the snowy owl, and the 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 magpie is central. But I did live in Winnipeg for 2 years, so I thought, well, I'll put in one central bird that's associated more with the central North America than the east. Um,
Yeah, Winnipeg's pretty far west.
yes, yes. And there's a brown pelican, which is uh, not too common in Canada, but certainly Eastern. I see them all the time when I go to Florida. The white pelican goes to northern Canada. Um, so they all were there for various reasons. There's a beautiful rose-breasted grosbeak, which has just holding it up as a reminder. It's not such a common bird, but it has a marking on its breast that really looks like a red heart. The male does. That was
Oh,
one of the things that the ornithologist pointed out. It's only the male that has this beautiful red breast. And to me, that bird just had to go in there. And the words are reveal your heart. Well, of course, that went in the heart chakra.
right.
And it says the heart shows up clearly. Share your love with those close to you whenever you can. The opportunity may fly by and not come again. That's like the bird. The bird fly, I've seen that bird at my feeder maybe twice, not very often. So it's there somewhere.
That's poetry. That is
Yes.
absolute poetry. So, how long did it take you to craft from, say, original thought and spark of inspiration to manufacturing? You know, certainly finding Heather, the ornithologist, at the university, to the production.
Well, it's a multifaceted process, and I consider the Bird Vibes meditation cards a really new product. But I did have an earlier version, which was simply called Bird Vibes. My first one was terrible. It was laminated. The lamination came off. I had to run around and
Uh,
replace people's decks and so on. So it was not a simple process. I produced something with a local company on my own. People loved the pictures, they loved my words, but it wasn't a successful production, I would say, in terms of the professionalism of it. And to make a long story short, I had this early version in a few iterations, and Beyond Words saw the early version and said we would be interested in mass producing your your bird vibes. Are you interested? And I said yes, because
oh,
I knew they were meant to go out farther. And at that point, I wrote the guidebook because there hadn't been a guidebook with it.
right.
So, and I was very specific that these are meditation cards. I wrote the guidebook, and like many other decks that you will have seen, the guidebook tells people how to use the cards. And but I had to come up with the different meditations that would work with these birds that I had
Mhm.
used or that I developed. And I had to show from my experience in using my earlier version how people could use the cards. For example, my clients have told me many ways they use them, and several people have told me that their children like to pick a card before they go to school. They're very
That's
positive.
beautiful. Beautiful.
And people have told me they pick a card in the morning when they get up, or they pick a card at night when they go to bed, or they might do a tarot reading with them even. You could do what you like with these cards. They
Right.
will work in various ways. And the guidebook gives examples of a 7 card draw. My brother-in-law, who was very, very ill, said he liked to read to look at the cards one at a time in order
Oh,
each day.
interesting.
Yeah.
They
And that was the
really,
way he did it.
yes, they really are stunning visualizations. So, talk about the validation of being approached by a company to mass produce them. I mean, that's a stamp of approval and universal validation, if ever there was one.
Well, in fact, I was working during COVID on another deck, and I had gone out with a proposal for this second deck, and beyond which I still have just parked for the time being because it's still very much with me. And Beyond Words said to me, "We don't have a place in our lineup for this deck that you're working on now, but we see from your past this bird vibes that you've done," and that's how it came about. So one thing
Ah,
led to another, and at some point I will go back to the one I did during COVID and probably do a little bit of rethinking and reformatting, and then see where I go from there with another deck.
that's lovely. Yeah, so very serendipitous. A lot of, I mean, and that's, I'm sure I don't need to tell you, that's how the universe really works. It is full of little twists and turns and surprises that steer us in the right direction.
I have to say I have a wonderful family too. I've been very blessed. I have a very close, direct and extended family in Canada and the United States. My sister who lives in British Columbia is much more of a birder than I am and gave me great help at the beginning. Said, Catherine, get your facts straight, get some names straight, that sort of
Mm-hmm.
thing.
Mm-hmm.
And I have family who helped me with the 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 pictures, even though Heather's pictures were there, they had to be formatted and so on. And
Mm-hmm.
I had met much help along the way from my daughters, my husband, my nieces and nephews, and so on. We're a very close family, so I'm quite blessed. Everyone was ready to provide support when I needed something in particular.
Oh, that is an incredible blessing indeed. So, my guest is the wonderful, very heartfelt, heart centered Catherine Bastedo. You may find her at Catherine with a C, Catherine C. Bastedo.com. On Facebook, her page is Vision Reiki. The card deck we are discussing today is for self study, meditation. It can be used for other purposes. It is a beautiful deck, bird vibes, meditation cards, and they are just lovely, not just to look at, but to reflect upon. So, would you like to do a bit of a spread with the cards or pull a couple of them?
I will pull a couple of them. Sure, I'd be happy to. And I would like to mention that I use these cards in my Reiki practice as well. So every time I see a client, I offer them a bird vibes card. And I use them
Oh,
it's a wonderful way to help people feel at ease when they start a Reiki session and to open up because they'll say, oh my goodness, that's exactly what I was thinking. Oh, I know I need that. Yes, I know. So it starts a bit of a conversation, and then we go into a Reiki session. And when I have a Reiki class, because I teach all levels of Reiki, then I pass them out around the circle and everyone draws the card and they read perhaps the top line or the whole thing as they're drawn. And last year I went to a retreat. It was just at the end of COVID. And I think every woman was in tears at the end of the retreat because the
oh,
cards were so right.
right.
And I also use them at my retreats, which I hold in Northern Ontario in the summertime. So I use them in many ways. And I'm happy to draw one now. I had drawn the goldfinch, which we mentioned, I think, at the
Yes.
beginning, and the raven. And those are the two I drew before. So now I will draw a card, say, for the readership, the audience.
Yes,
And
please.
I do this right now. I don't do plan any of this ahead of time, so it's
No.
completely
Spontaneous. Yes.
spontaneous. That's the word. And what is coming up is the mourning dove, which you had mentioned.
Tell us about the mourning dove because my parents passed, and when each of them passed, I would have mourning doves come and nest, and someone told me that they're the only bird that makes nest twice, possibly in one reproductive cycle. So I don't know enough. I should look into more. That's why I love to have you on the show today because I'm learning so much about these messengers that are all around us.
I have read that same thing as you have about the two nests. I don't see the nests around here, but I do certainly see mourning doves at my feeder. And once I saw them on my windowsill doing a bit of a mating ritual right on the brick outside of my windowsill. So they
Yes.
definitely do a little bit of a mating dance, I know. The card is number 45, so that would mean it is in the sixth chakra. Sorry, the seventh chakra,
Which is the
seventh chakra,
crown.
the crown chakra. And the title, each card has a title word. These are, on this card, it says seek peace.
Mm.
Seventh chakra, the color, as we know, is indigo. It says the mourning dove is a common sight in open habitats south of the boreal forest. The male's soft, drawn out cooing may sound mournful yet comforting. Let yourself be soothed by music, meditation, or whatever most lightens your heart.
Oh, that's
So I see
lovely.
this as a card of comfort, That sound, if people can imagine it, that soft coo, coo,
Mm-hmm.
coo.
Mm-hmm.
It's almost a sad sound. Sometimes people think it's an owl, but it's a dove, and it's a comforting sound, I think. So the reminder is in the card is the meditative part of it is what can you do to bring yourself peace? We all
Mm-hmm.
need to treat ourselves, I think, to comfort and peace in difficult times. And what is it that works for you? Is it
Mm-hmm.
sitting listening to some music that you love? Is it meditating? Is it doing yoga? Is it painting, writing, or going out for a walk in nature? So that's the reflective part. What do you do to bring yourself peace?
That is a very important message that I think often gets overlooked in our world today, especially with all the upheaval and strife that is occurring. So, that message is particularly relevant for our audience listening, and for the world at large. So, thank you for that. Um, do you want to also talk about the goldfinch and the raven that you pulled, or were those
Uh,
for?
let's pull something different just to add a little bit more variety.
Okay.
How about an osprey? Oh, I
Oh,
keep pulling seventh chakra cards today.
that's
And that's
really
interesting.
funny. I
Yeah,
have
it is. And it's the one that follows exactly after the mourning dove.
I have to tell you, I pulled cards for myself right before I came on with you,
Yes.
and I got the osprey.
Oh, there you are. It was meant to come out. It's saying, okay, I don't care if it's another seventh chakra, I'm here. This is a card that comes out for many people. It's interesting. I've seen with my deck, some cards come out quite frequently, and some cards hardly come out at all. So
Hmm.
when they do those odd ones, I say, pay attention. That card hardly ever comes out. Osprey comes out, and it says, honor your life purpose. And maybe that's why it comes out a lot, because sometimes another thing we forget. So, as I said, it starts with something about the bird. It says the osprey nests high in tree tops or on platforms near water and plunges into the water feet first to catch fish, sometimes becoming completely submerged. The osprey is connected to sky, land, and water. Have faith, your way will be shown and the actions to take made clear. I'm sure, like most people, you've probably wondered about the future. Well, you're an astrologer, but I wonder about the future.
Even I have to say, even astrologers, those that are much more well versed and veteran astrologers than I, definitely, it's nice to have validation from other sources. So that is very, very helpful. And there's such gorgeous words along with the illustrations.
I
It
wrote a
never
blog
hurt.
about, sorry,
Pardon?
I wrote a blog about the osprey. It's on my website because I've seen them in so many different places. I've seen them from far north up near Hudson's Bay,
Oh,
um,
wow.
uh, where I took my children up to see what the north was really like when you drive and then you have to take a train for a day and then you arrive in a tiny little village called Moosonee on the shore of James Bay. This is the north, kids. So
Wow.
there we were in a motel and we watched the osprey from our window diving. So that was
Wow.
memorable. And
That's, yeah.
there are many around here on the Ottawa River. I've seen them so often in Florida, but in Florida they're quite common. So I find that quite interesting how something that is very, very special in Canada and can be so common that people don't blink when they see an osprey. But it shows up for us, and every time it is saying your way will be made clear. And I find that is one of the hardest things for me, and I think for many people, is living in the present. And I tell myself that all the time, live in the moment, just for today. Part of the Reiki principles too, just for today. But it's really tough because we want to know what to do next and what our life is going to look like next year and the year after. And the osprey is saying, be patient, it'll become clear. You have a contract.
Yes. And I emphasize that right now, just astrologically, that's one thing that astrology can shed light on is that we're in a massive time of deconstruction And uncertainty comes with the deconstruction because all the paradigms that we have known are dissolving. And that elicits great fear about what is to come. And so, even more to the point of why this particular deck, bird vibes, meditation cards, really gives such great solace and elicits such peace and comfort as I have worked with them. And I have to laugh too, because the other card I drew for, for today's reading was the Northern Flicker, live in the moment.
Oh, there you go.
So there
That's
are truly no
interesting.
accidents.
Mhm.
It's all intended to be. And that is one of the messages I think of our times that we're living in right now is to trust and have good old fashioned faith. And it's not necessarily tied to any religion, but just to have faith that things will work out. There used to be a phrase called keep the faith. I don't know that you hear that much
Yes,
anymore, but that is certainly relevant these days, is to just trust the process, which I think is a similar way
yes,
of saying the same
yes,
thing.
yes, yes. I have a mug that says that, trust the process.
Hmm.
Well, one of the birds that occurred to me as you were speaking is one of the cards are all very positive, and I loved your word solace because I really like that idea that the cards give solace. And one of the cards that I guess is the closest to being much more of a punching message card is the one for the European starling. And it's number 5, so it's in the root chakra. And it says, I'm just showing the picture as a
Hmm.
reminder to Hilary.
Act in your highest interest.
Act in your highest interest. And it says the European starling feeds, travels, and even harasses other birds in groups. Be careful not to be swayed by others to inappropriate action. Choose the way that is truly right for you. And as you speak about the times today, I think that card wanted to come out and just remind us that we shouldn't be too swayed by other people, that we can go inside and reflect on what is right for us and how we want to think about something, how we want to reflect, and how we can change our thoughts too.
Yes, change your thoughts, change your life for sure. And that's a very pertinent point in terms of social media, which is so dominant right now and holds such sway in our opinions that we form. And to remember that we are blessed with an internal guidance system that is second to none when we allow ourselves to tune into it. And so that's the great gift of this deck is it's called Bird Vibes Meditation Cards by my guest Catherine Bastedo. You can find her at catherinecbastedo.com. Her Facebook page is Vision Reiki. She is a Reiki practitioner and master. Um, so tell us a little bit about your retreats that you offer, because that came up in our conversation earlier. They're in
Well, sure,
Ontario.
I'd love to. There are a few pictures on my website from my retreats, and they are for women only. I've just found that that works best, partly because of the nature of the place where I hold them. It's a very old cottage, over 100 years old. It's open to the rafters on the second floor, but it does have bedrooms. There's a cabin. And it's on a lake called Lake Muskoka, which is a fairly well-known cottage area lake where for Canadians and Americans and more people from other countries too. The retreat is held on an island in the lake, which has been visited by my family since the 1800s
Oh,
and
wow.
was originally indigenous land and then became what we call crown land and then was bought and turned into cottage area. So I believe there's a lot of energy. I know under the cottage there's a vein of smoky quartz that runs through it, and I found amethyst up there. There's a
Oh,
lot of
wow.
energy. Yeah, it's sitting on the rock. It's sitting on smoky quartz.
Wow.
And in the
That's
water around it, we
incredible.
found amethyst. And it sits on a height looking about 3 miles down this lake.
Wow.
And this is a place where people used to gather in the old days when they first started a Christian church there. They would gather
Mhm.
on the point, and people would come by canoe to listen to the preacher on the top of what we call the point there.
Mhm.
So there have been indigenous, there have been early church. There's been a lot of Reiki. There's been spiritual gatherings there. The place has a lot of beautiful energy, and people come when you're on an island. Um, you feel that you're a part. There's a beautiful book by Anne Morrow Lindbergh
Wow.
about being on Sanibel Island,
Yes.
which I love, and I always read bits of that at my retreat because it's the same feeling of being um, women being on an island and finding their peace, finding their inner peace. It takes a day to let go of the city or wherever people have come from, and then a few days there. They're usually about 5 day retreats. They vary from year to year. Last year, I taught a Reiki 1 class, so a very beginning level Reiki, because I
Mhm.
just had the sense, the intuitive sense that people didn't want something too heavy last summer. We were coming out of COVID and difficult times, and it needed to be light. There was a lot of dock time, hiking time,
Right, right.
enjoying ourselves time, and it was light. Other times I've taught a 3 day intensive Karuna master class there. So it varies from year to year, and I love having people, and I always have a great group of women. It's quite amazing. We have a lot of fun.
And they find you through your website and word of
Through my
mouth.
Yes, yes, often word of mouth through the website. People come back. I had one woman who was a Canadian woman who was an aid worker in Afghanistan, and
Wow.
she timed her holidays to come back for my retreat and came about
Oh,
4 times.
oh,
And she so needed a retreat and time away after Afghanistan. That was
wow.
during the worst of the troubles. And she'd come to my retreat, and when people were complaining about their little, we say bobo here, their little hurts, their little things going wrong in their life. And then she'd give some example from Afghanistan, which I won't go into because it's
Right.
not pleasant, but
Right.
she'd give some example from real life. And then there'd be a silence. Say, oh, well, I guess maybe it puts my troubles into perspective.
Right. For
So I've
sure.
had people from different places, and I welcome any contact that your listeners would like to make to find out more through my website. My email is there, and I'll be
Yes.
holding one again this summer.
Wonderful. Yes. My guest is the very lovely Catherine Bastedo. Her work is Bird Vibes meditation cards, which I encourage everybody to purchase. Um, Audubon Society must love this deck if they haven't found it already.
Well, it's just come out. December 26th was the publication date.
Oh my heavens, it's brand new.
Yes, it's brand new, just off the shelves.
Wow. Well, you must have the Audubon Society up in Canada,
Yes,
but
yes, of
yeah,
course. Yes.
yeah. So I can't imagine. I mean, and many nature centers
I'm
would
hoping
love.
it will go into nature museums. I've been in touch with the Canadian Museum of Nature here, and we'll be talking. I'm hoping it will go into nature museums and gardens, like beautiful gardens that have shops where people could purchase
Right, botanical
things. So
gardens.
we're reaching out to them. Places like the Naples Botanical Garden, Brook Green Gardens. There are wonderful gardens across Canada and the US, and of course in many countries. And I love visiting those sorts of gardens. And I think, oh, this is a place for bird vibes.
Yes, absolutely. I know I live in the Berkshires, which is Western Massachusetts. So I'm going to take it into the Berkshire Botanical Garden and promote it because it is really just an incredible resource for people. That brings us very much to the end. Unfortunately, I could spend hours talking with you. Are there any special books, resources, classes, teachers that you would suggest for someone just starting out as you were once upon a time, starting out in your journey that you found to be instrumental?
Yes, I would like to mention one of my teachers and close friends, and she does a great on has a great online practice as well. And her name is Julie Desmarais, and her you can reach her at info at Julie Desmarais. That's JulieDesmarais. So
Demarais.
Julie
Hmm.
Desmarais dot ca. So she
Hmm.
was one of my teachers and a very instrumental one. And she is the one who saw the hawk on my shoulder and encouraged me to produce
Oh,
bird vibes. Now she has an online Reiki practice. So if someone would like to learn Reiki, I specialize more in the upper levels, but Julie does all levels. So she would be one. And I would suggest Ted Andrews' books on animal speaks, animal speaks,
yes, that
nature
is.
speaks. There's a whole series of them about symbolism of birds and animals in nature.
Yes, I just purchased, I'm ashamed to say it took me this long to purchase Ted Andrews' book. For anybody listening who especially connects to animals. That is to me the master work. It's animal speak, and he's written certainly other books, but it's by Ted Andrews, and he goes through every animal and the totem and the spiritual message and every aspect of the animal that you could imagine, from A to Z. So, um, last question. I hate to ask the final question, but I must. If you could change the world for better in some way, how would you change it, Catherine?
I would hope that people would be more open and more uh, heart centered and non-judgmental. That's what I would hope for. And we all have probably a long way to go, but if we can aim for that, to put out our love, to share our light, and we all have a light to share. If we each share our light, the world will be a much, much brighter place.
I agree wholeheartedly. Thank you for that. And thank you for your beautiful presence and your your absolutely beautiful work and service and contribution. My guest is the wonderful Catherine Bastedo. You may find her brand new work, Bird Vibes Meditation Cards, whether you use them for yourself in reflection and meditation, or you give them as a gift to any bird lover, animal lover. They really are extraordinarily beautiful cards and deeply heartfelt cards for self study as well as meditation. You may find her, learn more about Catherine or her work. Catherine with a C, Catherine C. Bastedo, Bastedo.com. On Facebook, you may find her at Vision Reiki. That brings us to the end of this episode of Mystical Messages. To learn more about my work or to book a session with me, please visit hilaryharley.com. If you would like to read my monthly forecast or to check dates of planetary events and cycles, you may find the full transcript for all astrology episodes on my website. Thank you so much for tuning in today and listening. Please join me again in 2 weeks when I will bring you my astrology forecast for the upcoming month. I wish you many blessings as you journey forward.